The rain tapped gently on the windows, and the smell of fresh popcorn filled the air. It was Friday evening, and Lila had just arrived at Mr. Bennet's house. He had invited her for one of their usual movie nights. At 62, Edward Bennet was old enough to be her father, yet something about him always made Lila feel safe, seen, and strangely understood. She was 23, just out of university, still figuring out life. Her parents had passed away when she was a teen, and it was Edward, a friend of her late father, who had always been around to check on her. At first, he was just the kind older man who lived across the street. Over the years, he became something more. Her confidant, her anchor, her comfort. Edward opened the door with his usual soft smile, wearing his reading glasses and a cozy gray sweater. "Right on time," he said. Stepping aside, Lila stepped in, hugging herself tightly as the warmth of the house wrapped around her. "I wouldn't miss it," she replied with a smile. Their movie nights were quiet and comforting. They didn't talk much during the film, but their silences were never awkward. They were the kind that felt full, like words didn't need to be said. But tonight felt different. Lila couldn't explain it, but the air between them seemed charged, like something was waiting to happen. As they settled onto the couch, side by side, the movie started playing. It was an old romantic film, Edward's choice, as always. Halfway through the movie, Lila glanced at him. His face was calm, eyes on the screen, but his fingers trembled slightly as he reached for his tea. She noticed how his hands looked strong and experienced, how his eyes carried a kind of sadness she never asked about but always felt. She leaned her head against his shoulder without thinking. It was something she had done before, but tonight it felt more intimate, more vulnerable. She felt him freeze for a second before relaxing, placing his hand gently on hers. "Lila," he said softly, not looking away from the screen. "Yes," she whispered. He paused. "Do you ever think about us?" Her heart skipped a beat. Lila slowly lifted her head and looked at him. "What do you mean?" He finally turned his gaze to her, and in his eyes, she saw something she had never dared to look for before longing. "I know I'm older," he said, voice low, "much older, but you're not a little girl anymore. And these nights with you, they've become the brightest part of my life." Lila's breath caught in her chest. Her heart was racing, her thoughts spinning. Was this happening? Was Edward Mr. Bennet something? "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he added quickly. "If you want to pretend I never said this, I will. But I had to tell you." There was a silence that felt like the whole world had paused. Lila looked at him. Looked at him. She thought of the way he always remembered her favorite snacks, how he listened without judgment, how his voice calmed her panic during bad days. She had dated boys her age before. None had made her feel this kind of peace. "I think about us too," she said, her voice small but honest. He blinked. "You do?" She nodded, her eyes suddenly glossy. "I just didn't think you could ever feel the same." Edward took a slow breath, like he had been waiting to hear those words for years. Then he did something that stunned her. He walked over to the small drawer near his bookshelf, and pulled something out. A tiny velvet box. Lila sat frozen as he returned, her hands shaking slightly. "I bought this months ago," he said gently, "and I told myself I'd wait. Wait until I was sure you weren't just being kind, that your heart saw me the way mine sees you." He slowly knelt in front of her, the box still closed. "Lila, I know I'm not what people expect for you, but I love you. Every day, every quiet night, every laugh we share, I love it all. I want to grow old with you, even if I'm already there. Will you? Would you ever consider marrying me?" Tears welled in Lila's eyes. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but before she could say a word, the doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, slicing through the quiet moment like a blade. Edward froze, still kneeling with the small velvet box in his hand. Lila's heart was pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Neither of them moved at first. The weight of what had just happened still hung between them like a soft, trembling thread. "I'll get it," Edward finally said, his voice calm but distant. He stood slowly, carefully setting the box on the coffee table, and walked toward the door. Lila watched him go, her chest tight. Everything had shifted in just a few minutes. His confession, the ring, the look in his eyes. She felt like she was floating between disbelief and a dream she didn't know she was allowed to have. At the door stood Edward's neighbor, an older woman with a concerned look on her face. "Sorry to bother, Ed. Just wanted to let you know there's a car parked in front of your gate. Looks like someone's stuck in the mud outside." Edward gave a tight smile. Thanks, Marla. I'll take a look in a bit. As he closed the door, his shoulders seemed heavier. He came back into the room slowly, unsure of where to pick up from. But Lila made it easy. She stood now, hands clasped in front of her, eyes locked on the small velvet box. You meant it, she said softly, didn't you? He nodded. With every part of me. Lila stepped closer. I didn't come here tonight expecting this, but I think part of me has always hoped. Edward looked at her, surprised. Even with the age difference, I see it, she said gently. I know how it looks. But I also know how you make me feel. You make me feel like I matter, like I'm not too young, too broken, too lost. You make me feel loved. A silence passed before she added, Can I see it? He hesitated for only a moment, then picked up the velvet box and opened it. Inside was a delicate, timeless ring, simple, elegant, and beautiful. Just like him. Just like them. I don't expect an answer now, Edward said, his voice trembling slightly. I know this changes everything. I don't want to pressure you. Lila took the ring from the box, carefully holding it between her fingers. I don't need time. Edward's brows lifted. I want to say yes, she whispered, but I'm scared. Of what? He asked. Of what people will say. Of the future. Of how different our lives are. But I'm also scared of walking away from the one person who's always made me feel like I'm home. Edward stepped closer. He didn't touch her, but the warmth of his presence wrapped around her like a blanket. We don't have to decide tonight, he said softly. This isn't about rushing. It's about love, and timing. And truth. Lila looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. Then promise me something. Anything. That you won't take it back. That even if I need time, or if I hesitate, you'll still want me. He smiled, deeply and warmly. I'll wait forever if I have to. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel young or confused or unsure. She felt cherished. Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at the screen, her ex-boyfriend Ryan. Edward noticed the name flash across too. His face grew unreadable, but he didn't ask. Leela stared at the phone, heart pounding again for a different reason. She hadn't talked to Ryan in months. Why now? The phone buzzed again. I should probably take this, she said quietly. Edward gave her a small nod. Of course. She stepped outside to answer, not knowing that the call would stir a part of her past she thought was buried, and might test everything she had just started to believe. Lila stepped onto the porch, the cool night air brushing her skin. The phone still buzzed in her hand. With one last glance at Edward through the living room window, she took a breath and answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in months. Leela. Hey, it's me, Ryan. Her stomach tightened. The last time they had spoken, she had walked away in tears. Ryan had always wanted someone more like him, ambitious, loud, always in a rush. He had never understood her quiet dreams, her deep thoughts, or why she found comfort in long silences. What do you want, Ryan? She asked softly, her voice guarded. I don't know why I called, he said quickly. I saw your photo online. That picture with Edward. You were smiling. Really smiling. And I guess it made me realize I might have let go of something good. Leela's heart sank. That photo shot, remembered now. Someone had taken a candid shot of her and Edward last month at a local book fair. They were laughing over something silly. She hadn't thought much of it. You're a little late, Ryan, she said, her tone sharper now. You made me feel like I wasn't enough for you. Like my pace was too slow. Like my heart wasn't right. I was stupid, he replied. But he's 60-something, Lila, that's not normal. You deserve someone your age. Someone who can grow with you, not someone who's already. Stop, she cut him off. You don't get to do this. You don't get to come back just because you saw me happy with someone else. Silence again. Then his voice turned quiet. Do you love him? Leela looked through the window again. Edward had returned to the couch, but hadn't touched the ring. He was staring at the screen, though the movie was long over. Waiting for her, just like he always did. Yes, she whispered. I think I do. Ryan didn't respond. After a beat, the line went dead. He had hung up. Leela stood still, the night wind wrapping around her like a blanket of change. She had expected confusion, maybe even doubt. But what she felt was clarity. She walked back inside. Edward looked up as she returned, concern flickering in his eyes. Everything okay? He asked. Lila nodded and sat beside him again, even closer than before. It was Ryan. He didn't react, just waited. He saw our photo online and got jealous, she continued. Tried to make me second-guess what I feel for you. Edward stayed quiet. It wasn't the silence of doubt, but patience. Leela leaned into him, her voice steady now. But instead of confusion, I felt sure. I know who made me feel small. And I know who makes me feel whole. Edward finally turned to her. His eyes misty but full of something beautiful hope. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. I want to say yes, not someday. Now. He blinked, stunned. You're sure? She reached for the velvet box, opened it again, and this time, took the ring out herself. She held out her hand. Put it on me. Edward's hands trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger, his breath catching. When it settled there, they both stared at it in silence. It's real now, she said. It's always been real, he replied. They embraced gently, holding on not just to each other but to the life they had chosen, a life that didn't follow the rules, but one that felt deeply, honestly, and bravely right. Just then, Edward spoke quietly against her hair. There's something I need to tell you before we move forward. Lila pulled back slightly, her heart stuttering. What is it? He looked into her eyes, and for the first time tonight, fear showed behind his calm gaze. I've been keeping a secret. Something I didn't want to tell you, unless I was sure you loved me. Lila swallowed hard. What kind of secret? Edward hesitated, then took her hands in his. I might not have as much time left as I hoped. I might not have as much time left as I hoped. The words landed heavy in Lila's heart. She stared at Edward, trying to make sense of what he had just said. Her fingers tightened around his, her voice soft, almost afraid. What do you mean? Edward looked away for a moment, as if gathering the strength to answer. The glow of the fireplace danced across his lined face, making him look both fragile and strong all at once. I went for a checkup 3 months ago, he began. Routine tests, nothing serious. But the doctor found something spots on my lungs. They ran more scans. It's early, they say could be treatable. But it shook me. Leela felt her throat close up. You didn't tell me? I didn't want to burden you, he whispered. Especially when I wasn't sure what we were yet. I told myself I'd wait until after the next scan, but then tonight happened. You said yes. And I couldn't go on pretending. Lila pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. Edward, you're not a burden. Not now, not ever. I'm 62, Lila. There's a real chance you could lose me sooner than you deserve. I don't want to tie your future to a man who may not even be promised tomorrow. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. You already have. And I'm not walking away. But your life is my choice, she said firmly. And I choose you. Not for how long we have, but for how deeply I want to love you in the time we do. Edward's eyes glistened. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away the single tear that slipped down. I never imagined someone like you would love someone like me, he said. I didn't either, she replied with a smile through the sadness, but it happened. They sat like that for a while silent, together, wrapped in each other and the truth that had finally come out. The world outside their small home didn't matter, not the whispers, the doubts, or even time itself. Later that night, Edward made her tea while she curled up under the blanket, the engagement ring still glinting on her finger. He joined her again, and they talked about everything, his health, her dreams, their fears, their hopes. They didn't make promises they couldn't keep, but they did make one. To live with open hearts, Edward said, raising his mug like a toast. No matter what comes, Lila clinked her cup against his. And to never waste a single day. That night, they didn't sleep much. They lay side by side, fingers entwined, staring at the ceiling, sometimes talking, sometimes just breathing together. It was the kind of night that felt like both an ending and a beginning. But in the early hours of the morning, something unexpected happened. Edward's phone rang. He frowned, checking the screen. It was his doctor, he answered quickly, sitting up. Hello. Lila watched as his face shifted slowly, surprise, then confusion, and then something close to disbelief. He hung up and turned to her, his eyes wide. What is it? She asked, suddenly worried. They reviewed the new scan, he said breathlessly. The spots. They've shrunk. The doctor said it could have been inflammation or an infection all along. I might be okay, Leela gasped. Edward he pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I might actually get to live this life with you. Really live it. They laughed, cried, and held each other tighter. But just as they thought everything was falling into place, Lila's phone lit up again. This time it was a message from her aunt. One she hadn't spoken to in years. We need to talk. It's about your father and Edward. Lila stared at the message glowing on her phone screen. We need to talk. It's about your father and Edward. Her heart dropped into her stomach. The joy of the doctor's call still echoed in the room, but this message pulled her back into something darker. Something forgotten. Or maybe hidden. Edward noticed the change in her face. What is it? She slowly turned the screen toward him. His expression tightened the moment he read it. My Aunt Lila said quietly. We haven't spoken in years. Not since after Dad's funeral. Edward sat very still. What could she possibly mean? I don't know, Lila whispered, a strange chill running through her. But I need to find out. Edward gave a small nod, though his eyes had clouded over. Do you want to call her now? He asked. Lila hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded and tapped her aunt's number. The phone rang twice before a shaky voice picked up Lila. The woman asked, Is that you? Yes, Lila replied cautiously. What's going on? What? Do you mean it's about my dad and Edward? There was a long pause. Then her aunt sighed. I never thought I'd have to be the one to tell you. But now that you're planning to marry him, you deserve the truth. Lila's heart slammed into her chest. Tell me what your father and Edward weren't just friends, her aunt said. They were business partners. Your dad trusted him completely. But something happened near the end. A deal went bad, and your father believed Edward betrayed him. It tore them apart. Lila's breath caught. No, that can't be true. I'm not saying he's a bad man, her aunt added. I'm saying your father died believing he'd been stabbed in the back by someone he loved, like a brother. Lila sat in silence, trembling. She glanced at Edward, who had gone pale. He must have heard every word. I have documents, her aunt continued. Letters your father wrote. Come see me, and I'll show you. Lila ended the call slowly. The room felt like it was spinning. Edward didn't speak at first. Then he stood and walked to the window, his back to her. Is it true? Lila asked, barely able to push the words out. What she said about my dad. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then finally, he spoke. It's not the full truth. Then tell me everything, she pleaded. Edward turned slowly, his eyes filled with pain. Your father and I were like brothers. We built a small business together. But toward the end, he got involved with risky people. Investors with ugly intentions. I tried to stop him. I pulled out of the deal. That's when everything went wrong. But why would he blame you? Because he thought I abandoned him, Edward said, voice trembling. He begged me to go along with it, but I couldn't. I didn't want to drag us both down. When the deal collapsed and the debts came crashing, he blamed me for not staying. Lila's chest felt tight. And you never told me. I couldn't, Edward said, stepping closer. You'd lost him. I didn't want you to think you'd lost me too. But did you really walk away from him? She asked, her voice cracking. I tried to protect him, he said softly, but I failed, and I've lived with that guilt ever since. Lila sat down, shaking. Everything felt like it was falling apart. Could love survive something like this? Could she? Edward knelt beside her. Lila, please look at me. She turned slowly, tears filling her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I've only ever wanted to be someone you could count on. But if you need time, if this changes how you feel, I don't know what I feel, she whispered. I just know I need to see those letters. I need to know the truth for myself. He nodded, pain in his every breath. Then go. And when you've read them, come back. Or don't. Just know that I'll still love you, either way. Lila stood, grabbed her coat, and walked to the door. She turned back one last time. I don't know what I'll find, but I hope to come back to you. And with that, she left. Unaware that what waited in her aunt's dusty attic would not only reveal a betrayal, but a hidden truth that might change her love for Edward forever. Lila stood in her aunt's dusty attic, heart pounding as the woman handed her a faded leather box. These were your father's, her aunt said gently. He kept everything, notes, letters, even the contract with Edward. I think it's time you knew the full story. Lila opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were papers yellowed with age, scribbled letters, and a thick envelope marked in her father's handwriting. For Lila, if she ever needs to know. She opened it slowly, breath catching. My darling Lila, if you're reading this, Something must have pushed you to ask questions about Edward. I want you to know first I loved him like a brother, but I also made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. When Edward walked away from our deal, I thought he'd betrayed me. I was angry, desperate, and broken, but now, I know he was the only one trying to save me from myself. I don't blame him anymore. In fact, I hope one day, you find someone like him. Loyal, strong, kind, and if that someone is him, don't let our past keep you from your future. Tears ran down Leela's cheeks as she pressed the letter to her chest. The truth was clear now, not just about Edward, but about her own heart. He hadn't betrayed her father. He had tried to protect him. She drove back through the night, her heart racing not with fear this time, but with hope. The ring still rested on her finger. It had never left. When she arrived, Edward's porch light was still on. She climbed the steps and knocked. The door opened slowly. Edward stood there, eyes tired but warm. Leela, she didn't wait. She threw her arms around him, holding him tight. I know everything, she whispered. You tried to save him. He forgave you, even if you never knew it. Edward's arms tightened around her. You came back. I never really left, she said, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. I had to find the truth, so I could love you completely. He smiled, the weight in his chest lifting for the first time in years. You have no idea how much I've needed to hear that. She took his hand, leading him inside. Then let's stop being afraid of the past and start living the future. I don't care what anyone says. I want you, Edward, all of you. They sat on the couch again just like the night it all began, but this time, it wasn't just a movie night, it was the beginning of their life. They planned a quiet wedding in the garden that spring. Just close friends, a few neighbors, and Lila's aunt who cried through the entire ceremony. Edward wore a blue tie that matched Lila's eyes. She wore a simple white dress and walked down the aisle barefoot. When the vows were said and the rings were exchanged, Edward leaned close and whispered, "You've given me more life than I ever thought I'd have." And Leela smiled, tears shining. "You've given me a love I never believed I deserved." They kissed beneath the blooming trees, not as a young girl and an old man, but as two hearts who had found each other through time, truth, and the courage to love beyond what was expected. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. The end.